What is going on, everyone? Happy Sunday. Welcome into another episode of GC Live Sunday Reset with your host, the one, the only, yours truly, Jack Veltri. Appreciate all you guys tuning in. As always, I literally just got back from Starkville, Mississippi, maybe 10, 15 minutes ago, and I was like, yep, we're going to talk. I've been planning on doing this all day. I was going to do it this morning, but the service out in Starkville, if you haven't been there before, it's a very remote type of area for a college town. So not the best service out there. Wanted to make sure everything ran smoothly. So we're doing it tonight, kind of on short notice. So apologies about that. But hope you guys are all doing well. Appreciate you taking the time to tune in if you're doing so. And we've got a lot to talk about. We have got a lot to talk about. Football is obviously over now. South Carolina football, that is. College football in general is still going on for another few weeks here with the playoff semifinals this week. And then after that, you got the national championship on the 20th. So a lot to talk about with Gamecock football as the season comes to a sad end with the Gamecocks losing in the Citrus Bowl earlier this week. That feels like forever ago, but it was, this past week. And then obviously men's basketball we'll talk about kind of in the back half of the show. We're going to start with football. So before we get rolling, want to talk to you guys about our main sponsor, always right above us here, Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. If you are in the market for a home or you need help with your mortgage, but you don't know where to begin with any of this, right? If you have never bought a home before, but you don't even know where to start, I've got good news for you. Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans can help you out. He's been in the mortgage industry for more than 20 years at this point. He's a lifelong Gamecock fan, and he is a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central. So the absolute best trifecta, best of all worlds. I mean, that is exactly what you would want if you're looking for something like that. So if you're interested, give him a call, 803-422-6797. The NMLS number for him is 71597, or you can go to ClintHammond.com. So I appreciate all you guys tuning in as usual. Happy Sunday. Big Red asks, when is college baseball in full effect? Well, for me, we're getting there. We're going to start pumping out some baseball content, probably starting tomorrow, honestly. If not tomorrow, sometime this week. Baseball season is 40 days away for the Gamecocks as they'll open the season against Sacred Heart, ironically enough, on Valentine's Day, so February 14th. But baseball season is upon us, and it's getting close. So I'm really looking forward to it, especially with where basketball is at right now. And SE Scout guy says it is a kind of depressing time. The way the football season ended, the men's basketball team is pretty bad. At least we have the Lady Gamecocks, and even they are not looking great at times. Yeah, good point. It's a different time, right? I think it's both good and bad because look, 2024 was a great year for South Carolina, in my opinion, at least. You can disagree if you want. I think women's basketball winning the national championship, big deal right there. Football season going the way it was, and we'll talk about that here in a second. The football season was a lot of fun. 9 wins, and we'll talk more about it in a sec, but great year for football, in my opinion. Baseball wasn't too hot. Softball wasn't too hot. Men's basketball set the world on fire in 2023-24 season, winning 26 games. And obviously the back half of the year now hasn't been too great. But, look, it was a great year. And I think these are good times right now. Look, men's basketball, we'll talk about that later in the show. It is what it is. This weekend was not good for men's basketball. And I'll get into the specifics soon. But let's talk some football. I haven't been able to talk much about the Citrus Bowl and everything that happened on a live stream yet because, it's been very busy. Like, right after the game, it's New Year's Eve, keep in mind. So, dealing with getting all these other stories up and stuff. And then, getting back for New Year's Eve. And then January 1st, I was still in Orlando. I went to Disney World for the day with my girlfriend, Caroline. So we were out all day. So didn't get, to do a live stream. And then January 2nd, driving back from Orlando. And then the 3rd in the morning, I literally had just left for Starkville. And then I was there all weekend. So now that we're here and getting to talk about it, I know it's been a few days since the Citrus Bowl. I know a lot of you probably don't want to relive it. But we'll touch on it real quick, and then we'll kind of get into some more general thoughts on everything that is kind of going on with football. Because I think, again, football I think is in a good spot right now. It's a sour end of the season in my opinion, honestly. But I do think it doesn't bring too much negative light on what has been an otherwise really good step in the right direction season for South Carolina. So real quick, the Citrus Bowl, in case you missed it, South Carolina did lose that game 21-17 to Illinois. Illinois, give them a lot of credit. They played a lot better than I think most people were expecting in this game. From the South Carolina media standpoint, I didn't see many people pick Illinois, if any at all. I know, shout out Chris Wellbaum. I know he was the only one to pick Illinois, and he does it as the reverse jinx or whatever to help South Carolina. But other than that, I mean, look, I had South Carolina winning this game 35-20, and I think a lot of people probably didn't take Illinois too seriously. And got to give credit to Brett Bielema and his squad. They played pretty well in this game. And South Carolina had their chances to win. Again, final minutes of this game, South Carolina's moving down the field. And even for me, it didn't even feel like South Carolina had their fastball in this game, right? I think Lenore Sellers didn't play his best football, even though his stat line isn't even too bad. But we've seen him play a lot better. And I think just overall, the defense had some issues at times. You were missing Kyle Kennard and Rocket Sanders. That's obviously a big loss, even though everyone else was able to play in this game. But it just never felt like South Carolina had the hand on the wheel or both hands on the wheel at the same time. It felt like they were driving with their left hand on the wheel and had to try to get a grip on things. But they had a chance in the final minutes. Lenora Sellers, fourth down, throws a kind of low pass on fourth down to Josh Simon in the end zone. It was there. The play was open. But because, Sellers had a guy in his face, and also the throw just wasn't on target necessarily, like right to Josh, goes in and out of his hands, and it's a turnover on downs. And again, Illinois was able to run the clock out because they got a first down on a long 60-yard run by Josh McCray, who had an outstanding game with 2 touchdowns. But, I think at the end of the day, I don't think we're necessarily going to remember this game for what Illinois did or what South Carolina did necessarily on the field. I think we're probably going to remember this game 10, 15 years from now for the other reasons of things that happened in this game. The obvious elephants in the room. Number one, Nikki Minwari choosing to not play in the second half of the Citrus Bowl. I know he released that statement on Twitter the other day, and to be honest, like I don't understand how there was miscommunication about the whole situation. Like I've enjoyed covering Nick, right? I've enjoyed covering him for his entire college career now. Like he's a good dude, really good football player, all that good stuff. It just stinks that this is kind of the way he chose to go out, right? And the fact that he said he'll take some responsibility for it, you got to take full responsibility for it. That's just my opinion on it. You either play in the game or you don't. It's easy as that. I just don't like the idea of quitting on your teammates. And I know he said he didn't quit in that statement. I beg to differ. That's just my opinion. I don't know how how else you really put it other than he did quit. It just you're in the middle of a game where you're down by 4 points, 7-3 at halftime, if I'm not mistaken. And South Carolina is right in this thing. And I'm not saying one player makes the difference. It's not the case. Football's a team sport. But wouldn't it help if you had your starting safety out there? And how does that make things look for South Carolina on defense, right? I mean, luckily they have enough depth and talent to where you can plug and play and put different guys in. That's been the thing with this team all years. They've had so much depth to where, fortunately they didn't really have too bad of an issue with the injury bug this season. But imagine they did, and they didn't have guys behind Nick at safety or whatever, or at DB. That's just, I don't know. And South Carolina is fortunate. They got guys like Peyton Williams who can come in and play, and the defense doesn't really miss a beat. So the whole situation just was kind of a mess, to be honest. Like I saw Nick just standing on the sideline, no helmet in sight, football in hand, and that was kind of that. And then he got escorted to the locker room, as we later learned, when Shane Beamer found out, because he didn't know the situation was going on. Again, no, it seemed like no one knew besides Nick. And this just kind of felt like, again, I don't know what's going on with the situation deep down, what's going on in Nick's head when he's making that decision. It just felt like something that was a spur of the moment type of thing. Like, we literally heard from him maybe a week and a half earlier talking about, how excited he was to finish this thing out strong with his teammates, try to get that 10th win. And then this happens. I think if the Cam Ward situation didn't happen at Miami, where literally a few days earlier in Orlando, Cam gets whatever record he was going after with the Hurricanes in that Pop-Tarts Bowl, and then he sits out the second half. I hope that doesn't become a trend moving forward, because it's like I said before, I understand if you don't want to play because of the injuries and all that and risking your health. I get that. Even though you're going to be you're going to be covered with insurance and all that. Even though. So, I don't know. I just think you either need to play in the game entirely, like go 100% or don't go at all. Like, it's easy as that. And it just makes everything easier for South Carolina. And we got a question here from Big Red who asks, why was Beamer so cryptic about it when Nikki was kind of open about it on social media? I don't really know, to be honest. I think just in that moment, you don't want to. I don't know. I think he just didn't. I'm not going to really. I don't know, to be honest. I haven't thought about it too much on that question there, Big Red. I think it's more so just, why as a coach, why would you? Shane's not going to throw a guy under the bus. We know that. Like, he's a good dude, a great coach that the players love. Like, the last thing that's just not his style. And I think it's not for him to reveal all the details of what happened. I think that was, I understand why Nick was open about it. And again, we don't know. I feel like there's still more to the story we don't entirely know. But maybe we'll know from Nick at a later date. But the thing with Nick is, it's not even just this one day, that the one game that's going to be impactful with his decision. It's, NFL scouts. Now that he's declared for the draft officially, I can rest assured, I'm sure NFL scouts, GMs, coaches, they're all going to ask, okay, why'd you sit out the second half of that game? Why'd you quit on your teammates? All this and that. He's going to have to answer those questions for the next few months. Whether it's from the media or an NFL team. Like, these are valid questions that should be asked. And it's, we haven't gotten to talk to Nick in a public setting and media availability since this happened. But we do know, obviously, now that he's declared for the draft, and that was his last game at South Carolina. So I don't want to say it's a stain. It's a little bit of a stain on his time at Carolina, but I don't think it overshadows just how good he was for the Gamecocks. Like, he was great this year, played very well, had a great season. So I figured he would declare for the draft, but I don't think anyone had the foresight to know this was going to happen. It kind of just, again, it's just a mess, to be honest, in my opinion. So I don't like the decision to quit on your teammates, especially with that, since you said you were going to play in the bowl game. But hey, everyone's different, so I get it. All right. Then the other thing that happened, real quick. Shane Beamer, Brett Bielema. I'm sure you guys have heard about it plenty by now. I think it's second half. Illinois got an injured player. Brett goes over to check on him, and then he starts barking at what everyone believed to be just Shane Beamer. But as Brett made it clear during or after the game and post-game press conferences, he was yelling at the entire sideline, and he gave the what is it called, the T-bar motion. With his arms extended out and stuff. And look, I think it ended up being because he wasn't a real fan of South Carolina on the ensuing kickoff, or the previous kickoff. Juju McDowell had put his arms out like this, the T-bar motion, and that normally means, South Carolina's going to take a touchback, this and that. And the kick's going to sail into the end zone. Well, Juju catches the ball in the end zone, then throws it across to the other side of the end zone to Nick Harbor, who takes it out for 25 yards. And it would have been as good of a touchback as that. Same difference. But, Brett seemingly had an issue with that. I get it. Injuries and all that sort of stuff. But, it's just, it seemed a little uncalled for, though, for him to go over, check on an injured player, and then start, causing drama. And, Shane's going ballistic. Like, he was pissed, literally had to be held back by 3 to 4 coaches and stuff on his staff. And it's like, in the moment you're like, what is going on here? Like you're watching from the press box like I was, and I'm like, what is going on? And then you learn more about the details after, and it's like, oh, okay. Well, I see now. So look, I think it's safe to say these two coaches are not the best of friends right now. Maybe that'll change. I've seen Brett's been very active on social media lately, and kind of he's kind of acting like the Walmart version of Lane Kiffin right now, being a troll on Twitter. So hey, more power to you. You won the Citrus Bowl. All good fun, I guess. But yeah, so basically, look, it's a tough end of the season for South Carolina. It's not exactly the way you imagined it going down with all this other this side drama and stuff. But nevertheless, I don't think this loss, while you would have loved to get 10 wins with your South Carolina, I don't think it ruins the season. Like, this was still a great year. 9 wins. I don't think many people expected that. I know most of the media probably didn't. I don't know about fans, but I mean, I didn't see a lot of 9-4 projections out there for South Carolina. I mean, heck, I had them 8-4, and I thought that was too high, still compared to most. But I do think this was a good year for South Carolina. It was a great year, actually. And, going 9-3 in the regular season, finishing the regular season on a 6-game winning streak, winning your 3 trophy games, beating Clemson on the road in Death Valley, and you have your quarterback of the future. Lenore Sellers is your answer right now at quarterback. Granted, you're going to have to fill a lot of holes for next season, which South Carolina already has in a lot of cases. But this year was different. This year was special. Like, you had everything kind of just worked out for South Carolina. And that's where I'm not going to dive too much into 2025 just yet, because we just don't know exactly what the entire team's going to look like yet. But I can say it's going to be different next year. I think I'd love to say South Carolina is a 10-win team, college football playoff bound next year. But that might not happen. It's just this defense was so good. You had so many things went right for South Carolina. Like, your defense was outstanding. You had so many guys come back. You hit perfectly in the transfer portal, nailed it with guys like Demetrius Knight Jr. and Kyle Kennard. Maybe South Carolina hits in the portal again. Maybe the guys that they're bringing in are going to be exactly what D. Knight and Kennard were, and guys like Torselli Simpkins and players like that just turned out to be absolute diamonds in the rough that were studs this season for South Carolina. But what if that doesn't happen again? And what if the South Carolina just can't replicate that same production? That's where I think you might see a little bit of a drop off going into next year. But I'm not going to jump to any conclusions yet, because, again, we don't know what the team looks like completely. We have a little bit of an idea of it with some of the portal pickups they've had and some of the guys that are coming back and stuff. Like, they're all returning a lot of good talent. Make no mistake about it. And it all starts with your quarterback with Sellers. But I do get a little bit worried that you brought so many guys back for this season to have a type of run like this, that people's expectations are going to be sky high, and you might return to a little bit of normalcy. Maybe my normalcy, maybe a 6-7 win season. I don't know. I think in some ways there is a chance where South Carolina can repeat this again, but a lot of things have to go right too. I think just that is kind of how this season, I'll look at this season, is that so many things went right for Carolina, and that it all just kind of came together after that Alabama game. Like, that Alabama game, South Carolina was 3-3, had just suffered a 27-25 loss in Tuscaloosa, a game that they should have probably won. And that was the turning point in the year. Like, they went to Oklahoma the next week, absolutely dominated the Sooners. I mean, that game was over in the first quarter, and everything just took off from there. So, a great year, a lot of standouts. Sellers is obviously fantastic this year. I know he didn't have his best game against Illinois. I know things looked a little off. I mean, you got to keep in mind, new coordinator calling plays and stuff. Didn't have Rocket Sanders in the backfield. Illinois' defense played very well. So a lot of different factors probably went into it. But I do think overall Sellers was very solid for South Carolina this year. Definitely leads, I think, most people to believe that Carolina has a chance to win just about any game with him under center. So look, he Start of the year off a little bit rough with the Old Dominion game. He finally got it going by the LSU game, and then dealt with some injuries this year and stuff. So I feel like we didn't even get to see the full version of how how good Sellers can be, and that's a good thing, right? You're gonna have him for you could have him up to 3 more years if you really wanted to. Realistically, just my opinion, I think if he has another good year, I think he's probably going to go to the draft. That's just my thought process on it. But we'll see. So enjoy Sellers while you got him. Outside of that, I mean, look, you're going to have to figure out the running back room, but I think you're in a good spot. You have Oscar Attaway probably coming back. You can have Jawarren Howell, Matthew Fuller. Maybe you add a guy out of the portal. I know they missed on Justice Haynes, but maybe you go out and add someone else. We'll see. And then receivers, I feel like we'll see. We'll see. Nick Carver's coming back. We learned that yesterday. But I feel like you still don't have a true number one guy at receiver. You'll have a lot of new blood coming in. You'll have obviously all those freshmen coming in and whatnot that Mike Furry's recruited. We'll see. But guys are going to need to step up. And then tight end, I'm feeling good about those guys out there. Lose Josh Simon, but you get Michael Smith and Brady Hunt back, guys like that. Mike Tyler coming in. I think you're in a good spot there. And then, I'm not going to go through every position here, but offensive line, we'll see. Defense is probably the big question for me is like, okay, you're losing a lot of guys. Like, you're losing a ton of starters. We'll see what happens with Bam Martin-Scott and if he's able to come back for a 7th year with this whole JUCO situation. Secondary, I feel like that's probably the one area you're not losing a ton of talent, but you're going to need guys to step up. It's plain and simple as that. And if guys are able to step up and build off of this season, which I do think they can, you might have another 9-win season. Heck, you might even have 10 if you can rattle off some wins. And it's the same schedule next year for conference play, just flip-flop. So any team that South Carolina played on the road this year, like Oklahoma, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, they're all coming to Carolina this year or in 2025. And then any home game South Carolina played, Missouri, who else they play at home this year? Ole Miss, A&M. You're going to those places next season, I should say. I'm still processing that it's 2025 right now. So overall, very good year for Carolina. 9-4 to finish the season. Obviously, the Citrus Bowl, you would have loved to win that game. Had a chance to. Couldn't get it done. But overall, it was a great year for the Gamecocks in football. And, hey, this time last year, it was a 5-win season, and we didn't know what was going to happen next. Didn't know what the status of this team was going to be. You lost Spencer Rattler. You lost Xavier Legette. We didn't know about these guys they were bringing in, what they were going to end up being. So, very good year for Carolina in football. Now, on the flip side, we'll have to talk about men's basketball now in a second. But, this weekend was rough. Was rough to say the least. But first, let's talk about our other sponsor, Prize Picks. So Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in all of North America. They're the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. So instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And then, of course, watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks has quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types to choose from. It's what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. I've used Prize Picks plenty in the past, still use it a bit to this day. It's a lot of fun. You can choose from literally just about any sport you could think of. College football is winding down. NFL playoffs are about to heat up starting this upcoming weekend. Baseball's around the corner. Basketball's going on right now, college and NBA. Hockey's going on. I mean, look, the options are really endless. Soccer is going on, I'm sure. So a lot to choose from. If you're interested, just go to prizepicks.com or download the PrizePicks app and use the code on-screen GC, which stands for Gamecock Central, to receive a guaranteed $50 once you play $5 in the lineup. So let's talk some hoops. Men's basketball. Oh boy, that was rough. That was a rough game. In case you missed it, South Carolina men's basketball was out in Starkville yesterday on Saturday, lost 85-50 to number 17 Mississippi State. An absolute disaster of a game. No way to sugarcoat it. I wish I could be more positive about it. This game was rough. It was just absolutely terrible to watch. South Carolina was out of it in the early minutes of this game. I mean, as soon as Josh Hubbard hit those 2 threes to kind of kickstart Mississippi State in this game, and South Carolina couldn't do anything offensively. I mean, they didn't have 10 points until the 15-minute mark. I'm sorry, the 5 minutes left to go in the first half. I mean, it was rough. I mean, you only had 18 points in the first half. You're already down by 25 going into the break. I mean, that was it. I mean, I don't think I've seen South Carolina play a worse game of college basketball in my time covering this team. I know they had the 40-point loss to Auburn last year, out at Auburn, and then they got killed by Auburn again in the SEC tournament. And I know they got really beat down by Alabama at Coleman Coliseum last season. But nothing about this game yesterday was positive, really. I mean, Zach Davis was the only positive, if you want to call it that, yet. He did have 22 points. Good for him and all that. I feel like he did play a little bit of hero ball, in my opinion. And then on defense, he had a few breakdowns. There was a time in this game where he's guarding near the baseline and guy blows right past him and gets a wide open dunk. I mean, he was good from a stat standpoint, but more in depth. I mean, it wasn't amazing by any means. So not a ton of good things to take away from this game. I think the reason why we saw South Carolina play the way they did yesterday is for a number of reasons. Number one, they just didn't have the fight in them. I mean, Lamont Paris admitted it after the game that he just felt like the fight wasn't there from this team, and it's evident. I mean, when you're down 30 points 4 minutes into the second half, it's hard to find much motivation to get back into this game and all that. It would have been good to see South Carolina cut this lead down to maybe 15 points, something like that. But they didn't. Mississippi State just kept firing away, and I mean, this game was about as bad as it's been all year. And you kind of had the feeling, if you paid close enough attention to this team this year, you kind of knew something like this was brewing, because Carolina, while they did win 10 games in non-conference play, they did trail at halftime to teams like East Carolina and Radford and Presbyterian, all lower-tier mid-major opponents that you should be dominating, quite frankly. And I know they won all 3 of those games, but the fact that you got off to slow starts, I mean, look, slow starts have been just the norm for South Carolina at this point. All season long, it's been very, very slow starts, just very poor basketball to start games. And it was sloppy again yesterday. You turned the ball over 10 times in the first half. You couldn't get anything going offensively. I mean, Mississippi State suffocated you on defense, and then State was just hitting a bunch of good shots. I mean, it's as simple as that. They couldn't get into a rhythm, and by the time I don't even know if they really even ever did, to be honest. By the time they started scoring a little bit, the game was over. I mean, it was simple as that. They lost by 35 points. And it was the start of SEC play, and that is the worst way to get this thing going. I mean, I just think the real issue is and again, I don't think one player makes the team, but I mean, Colin Murray Boyles, to really drive home just how rough yesterday was, he had more turnovers than points. And this is a guy that we're talking about as a potential NBA draft lottery pick. He had 6 turnovers in this game and just 5 points. And that's in 30 minutes. I mean, Miles Studi was terrible yesterday. He had 1 point on, he had a free throw. Jacoby Wright didn't do anything. Nick Pringle was fine, I guess, but he also had 3 turnovers in this game. Jamari Thomas has been, I don't want to say awful. I know some of y'all are probably going to think that, but he hasn't been, if he's serving as the replacement for Talon Cooper, Michi Johnson, maybe a hybrid maybe. He hasn't lived up to those expectations, in my opinion. 6 points yesterday, 1 of 8 from the floor, 6 assists and 3 rebounds and 2 steals, but it's far too inconsistent for me to be yeah, he's been a great portal pickup. Quite frankly, I don't think any of the portal pickups have been very good. Nick Pringle's supposed to be to fill the void at the big man, the 5 spot, which you had a real issue with last season, where you're facing Auburn and Jonai Broom, and then you're playing Oregon and N'Faly Dante, and you get absolutely outclassed in the paint, at least in my opinion. And it was evident right then and there that, hey, you need to go get a SEC big man, a physical guy that can go out there and compete and be a nice compliment for CMB so he doesn't have to play the 5, which is what we saw last year where he's playing the 5 and it's just he's a great player, but he's not. I don't think he's the 5. I think he's the 4 where he pretty much belongs. And so far this year, Pringle, he's been fine, I guess. He's had a pretty good season statistically speaking. But I mean, just watching him, it's like he's not he's a tall dude, very, very big dude, but he's not going into the paint and getting he's not your typical he's not like your Josh Gray, I guess, if you want to make a comparison here. Like he's not you're in the paint, grabbing rebounds, your enforcer in there. It hasn't felt like that. Feels like South Carolina just got out physical yesterday. Even Pringle admitted after the game they got out toughed. And they don't look aggressive, right? You would think after beating your arch rival in Clemson, literally maybe 2 weeks ago, you would think that would hype this team up and get them ready to go. But like it feels like they wake up with like hitting the snooze alarm 5 minutes before the game. Like it feels like they are not ready to go. And you would have thought after that Clemson game, like I even said it myself, I thought like, okay, this team's ready for conference play. They've proven they could beat a good team, and they did it the hard way. But ever since then, it just feels like this team has played so lackadaisical, very rough basketball, tough stretches. And it's only going to get tougher from here because, newsflash, you have probably the week that is going – this week is probably going to – if things don't go well, you're probably done. Like your season's probably a wrap by this point because you play number 5 Alabama on Wednesday, and then you host number 2 Auburn on Saturday. Both games are at home. Got a chance to win, but I think it's a very minuscule chance because Alabama just smoked Oklahoma yesterday, and Auburn beat, I think it was Missouri, pretty handedly. So these are 2 of the top 5 teams in college basketball right now, the best teams in the SEC. I'm very worried South Carolina is going to get blown out in both these games, being quite honest. I don't like to be negative when I don't have to be, but when I need to be, I will. And I think this team is just, they are in trouble. If they go 0-3 to start conference play, that's why yesterday was so important to beat Mississippi State. I know the Bulldogs are a good enough team. They're not as good as Alabama and Auburn and Kentucky and teams like that in Florida, teams like that, in my opinion. But they're good enough to where, obviously, you got the results yesterday. It's just South Carolina has a lot of issues right now. They're turning the ball over way too much. They don't have enough energy. The pickups they made just aren't working out, it seems right now. And, the slow starts are killing them. Like, it's simple as that. If they are down at halftime, they are done. Like, there's no coming back from a 25-point deficit. I mean, maybe with a 10-point deficit, you can make a comeback, play like a good second-half team like they had been doing in non-con. But I just think there are so many issues right now that it's not even one thing you can do. It's like trying to put duct tape on to seal up a hole where water's coming in, and then a new hole breaks out. It's like it's not my best analogy, but you kind of, if you are listening, you kind of probably understand what I'm saying. There's just no easy fix for South Carolina, it seems. And I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think it is going to be tough to change everything up in 3 days from now. I mean, Wednesday could be rough. It would very much shock me if this team went out here and won one of these games against Alabama or Auburn. Like, I'll be shocked if they win. I think what we just need to see is just a good response, that they have a pulse. Like, I'm not expecting this season to be NCAA tournament bound by any means. Like, I think maybe we see this team maybe a little bit better than 2 years ago, where I think they won maybe like 4 games in conference play during an 11-win season. I mean, this team has got too much talent to be where they are right now. And I know they're 10-4, but like SEC play could be, I mean, these next 17 games could be very rough. And with how good this conference is, you're in trouble. Like, it's as simple as that. You have 9 more quad 1 games to play in a row here, and then you have a few more to come after that. This conference is about as tough as it's been in some time, and it just happens that South Carolina is playing some of the worst basketball right now, even though it's 1 game. So very, very rough stretch to start the season. If you go 0-3, like I said, after Saturday, I just feel like, I mean, things can change, obviously, but if you're not showing any like pulse or sign of hope, then I just don't see the next 15 or whatever games after that in conference play going your way. But we'll see. I don't think it's going to be last year Missouri bad, or you didn't win a single conference game. South Carolina will win a few games, but I mean, I think Ken Palm has South Carolina maybe going 5-13 in SEC. Last time I checked, I think this morning or yesterday, I can see it. They'll win a few games here and there, but until they prove that they can get out of these slow starts and stop turning the ball over every 5 seconds in the game, and guys actually play to their capabilities and they show energy, that's a lot of things you got to fix. And if even if you fix one of them, fixing the slow starts would be fantastic. But if you're not able to figure it out relatively soon here, you're going to be in a hole that's way too tough to get out of. Let's answer a few questions here, and then we'll start to wrap things up a little bit. We'll answer the basketball questions first. Jack Stevenson says, what are your thoughts on guard play? I don't think it's been good enough this year. I think Talon Cooper is single-handedly the biggest loss South Carolina had after last season. I know BJ Mack was great. I know Michi Johnson was pretty good at times. Something about Talon is just different. He's a floor general. He's not your ball hog scoring guard, that type of thing. But he's such a great distributor and a great leader on the floor that, like, when the going gets tough, like when it got tough last year, South Carolina was always able to bounce back, it seemed. Like after losing by 40 to Auburn, I can't remember who they played, but they obviously went out and won the next game. So, look, Talon, great player. I think him not being around anymore because he ran out of eligibility after last season, without a doubt, the biggest loss. If you had him back this year, I don't think you would be having Jamari Thomas on your team right now. Or maybe if you did have Jamari on your team, I think with him, he's more of a scoring guard, in my opinion, and Talon's the distributor. If you had them both, it'd be like, okay, Jamari's replacing Michi Johnson then. But because you lost both guys and you're kind of counting on Jacoby Wright, who didn't start, I think he only started one game last year. Not to say he can't start, but I mean, look, you're counting on him to be your starting guard, and then you got Jamari at the point, and just other guys haven't stepped up. Like Morris Ugasuk has been or Ugasuk, I guess, with the new last name pronunciation. He's been all right. Cam Scott he's playing a little bit more, but nothing insane. Miles Studi hasn't been great this year. Zach Davis has been hit or miss. I mean, that's kind of the summary of this guard rotation, is that a lot of inconsistencies. And when you count on a guy like Jamari, who was the MEAC player of the year last season, to come in and fill not just one void, but two, that can be tough. And I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but the guard play just hasn't really been there for South Carolina this year like it was last year, and just the play in general. Big Red asks, how much has the roster changed for men's basketball? You lost Michi Johnson, you lost BJ Mack, you lost Talon Cooper, you lost Stephen Clark. I mean, the first three guys I just named were starters for you last year, and even Stephen Clark started a few games last season. It was always going to be tough to replace those guys, and it has been, obviously. But I felt good about them bringing in Nick Pringle and Jamari and guys like that to come in and kind of fill those voids a little bit. And you were adding Cam Scott from the high school ranks, and you brought in Jordan Butler, who hasn't really played much this year. I mean, I felt good enough about where they were at, even though they were losing some key guys. I felt Zach Davis was going to take the next step forward. I thought Jacoby was going to do some really good things in his final year, which, again, these guys have had some moments, but it's never been consistent, and that's the biggest thing. So basketball rosters aren't even that big, honestly, but like when you're losing three starters, that's always going to be tough to fill. It's not always going to be it's like football, right? This is the thought process I think people are having going into next season is, how is South Carolina going to be able to replicate what they got out of the portal with guys like D Knight and Kennard? It's not always going to be a one-to-one, replication of what you got out of those guys. You're going to have some misses in the portal. And I think in this case for basketball, I think it's a little bit clear that we're seeing that they've had a little bit of misses here, even though, look, there's still 17 games to go, and things can definitely change. Quincy asks, why doesn't Arden Conyers play? Don't tell me not good enough. They all struggled yesterday. Yeah, you're right. I mean, he's definitely good enough, I think, to play. I mean, I've liked what I've seen from him in little time this year, and I heard so many good things about how he's developed. But I think Lamont kind of answered it a little bit yesterday because he was asked about it. And it basically just comes down to it's hard to throw a guy out there that just hasn't played a lot of minutes. And I know it's easy to say, oh, we'll just put him in the game so he can get more minutes, get more experience. But it's hard to do that in a league like the SEC, where think about what it would do for a guy's confidence to throw him out there and he get beat down or whatever and all that. I mean, I don't know. I do worry a little bit about maybe Arden transferring after the season. I don't know. I have no. This is just that's just the vibe in my head. I'm thinking like, if logically speaking, if he's not playing at all this year, why would he want to come back? You know what I mean? Like, he could go somewhere else and potentially play more than not. So I think that's basically what it comes down to. Is just it's hard to throw a guy out there that hasn't played a lot of minutes. But beyond that, I don't know. I think he should be getting in there, but that's more of an in-house decision. Big Red asks, do you see this team making the SEC tournament? Trying to think. So the SEC tournament, what is it? The bottom two seeds don't make it, or the bottom two teams. Am I mistaken on that? I'm pretty sure that's how it goes. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Again, I'm just going off the rip here, but I don't know. They're not going to be a high seed in my opinion if they do. Which, I mean, like, if I'm right in that the bottom two teams don't make it, we might not see South Carolina in there then. But I think they'll win enough games. Like, if they were able to get in 2 years ago with how bad the first season of the Paris era was, I don't see why this team couldn't get in. It would be a real shame if this team didn't make the SEC tournament. And we'll see what happens, right? This is going to be a long season, I think, and maybe things change. Maybe they go out here and beat Alabama. I don't think it's going to happen at all, but hey, crazier things have happened, right? Like, who thought this team would have stunned Kentucky 2 years ago in what was an otherwise really, really rough year? So we'll see what happens. A little bit of football questions here. Big Red asked something from earlier. Who's supposed to be in Columbia next year from this year from the running back room? Seems like for sure it's going to be Matthew Fuller and Jawarn Howell. We'll see about Oscar Attaway. I know he's got another year of eligibility, but it hasn't come out publicly that he's coming back, this and that. So I feel like if he were to come back, he'd be RB1. I think it's clear as day. He had over 100 all-purpose yards in the Citrus Bowl. He did a pretty good game, all things considered. So I think he'd be your RB1 if he were to come back. And then after that, it's Fuller and Howell, and in no particular order there. I think those guys are going to play a lot. You probably could get Bradley Dunn back for next year with another year of eligibility. We'll see what happens there. I still feel like with three really good running backs or young running backs in Fuller and Howell. I know I said three. I meant to say two. And then you got Oscar as the older guy if he comes back. That's a pretty good rotation right there, but it wouldn't hurt to have another guy in there that is like your transfer portal pickup maybe. We'll see. And then Big Red also asks, did Beamer contact anyone in the NCAA about taunting penalties, especially by coaches? We haven't talked to Shane since the game, so I don't have an answer for you on that. I'm not going to assume, but one can imagine, with the way he kind of went about things after the LSU game, it would, I think, probably, but I don't know. So we'll see what ends up coming of that whenever we talk to him. And got a comment here from KB who says, leadership missing at times. Last year's team seemed to have better leaders. Am I wrong? And this is in reference to basketball, by the way. No, I think you're totally right. That's the other thing. Look, talent is one thing. South Carolina has talent. It's just it's not translating over to the floor completely. They're missing leadership. And we're going to see what happens. I'd be very interested to ask Lamont next time we get to speak to him. Hopefully we'll get to talk to him before the Alabama game, because I was thinking about this on the way back from Starkville today. I just want to know, how are the guys responding in the days after this really rough loss? And, who are the guys that are stepping up right now as leaders? Because I feel like we just don't know who those guys are. They got older guys, but it's not. It just doesn't feel like they have the flow. Everything went right for last year's team, but they had talent, and they also had good leadership in that room. Talon, again, probably the most underrated loss this team has had in quite some time. Losing him was so tough, and his experience, his role that he played is so invaluable that it's hard to replace a guy like that. And BJ Mack, Michi Johnson, also tough losses, but I'm I'm very curious to know what that situation is looking like, because I just don't feel like they have the true leadership right now. But maybe that'll change. I don't know. Before we get out of here, Big Red asks, are there any other players that are dual sport guys outside of guys like Harbor? Not to my knowledge. I'm trying to. I don't think so. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but I don't. I don't. I don't think so. Uh, not that I know of. EXO commenting on my shadow banner. Just ignore. Sorry, I'm trying to get to all these comments. EXO, but I'll bring them up. And yeah, and I'm not skipping over anyone's. Believe me. I try to, as you guys know by now, if you've listened to me for long enough, I try to get to as many comments as I can. Um, but yeah, so the South Carolina women's basketball had a good game today. I know they were down for a little bit in this game against Mississippi State today out in Starkville, but hey, they still won. And I know it's I know I don't cover the team on a day-to-day basis or anything like that, since my beat is not women's basketball. But look, I know I can tell you firsthand. I mean, this team they've got some work to do. It's not last year's team. It's definitely different. And I just, the consensus just feels like it's going to be tough to get back to the Final Four and the national title game. But hey, I think who knows? I mean, South Carolina's proven that they can go out here and beat teams pretty handily. It just doesn't feel like the same vibe as last year, but we'll see. And then EXO also says, main concern for me is lack of fight and chemistry for men's basketball. Yeah, absolutely agreed. I definitely agree with you on that, EXO. I just think, like I said before, it was just very discouraging just watching, seeing, and I'm sure the fan base feels the same way, but just no fight in that game yesterday. And when your coach has to come out and literally say that, and if anyone wants to blame LP for that, go ahead. Like, I think it's the wrong way to look at it, but look, obviously you can only do so much when guys are out there and they're just not playing hard and they're giving up, they're breaking down on defense, and shots aren't going in, and your coach has to literally say after the game he just didn't see the fight. That's a problem. And at this point, chemistry, like, look, they've been together since the summer. Like, I know it's a tough loss and all that, but I think like they should have that chemistry down by now. And if they don't, then I don't know what to say. But we'll see. And SC Scout guy's right. I would love this too. It would be nice if someone from the football team could contribute to the basketball team now that their season is done. I'm sure some guy, going back to that question Big Red asks about if any guys are dual sport guys. I'm sure there's some guys from the high school level that used to play 2 sports, 3 sports, whatever. So it would be nice to see. Maybe they could see if like a Bruce Ellington or something has an extra year of eligibility. I don't know, but I think that's a good way to wrap it up. Look, we talked a lot this evening, a lot of thoughts. Men's basketball is in a tough position. A lot of tough games coming up. Football season's over now, but a lot to look forward to. And then soon enough, man, I'm looking forward to it. Baseball season will be here in 40 days. Looking forward to it. We're going to have a lot of baseball content coming out here over the next few weeks leading up to the season with previews and all that good stuff. And then basketball content will continue to roll on. Of course, football is always rolling as usual. So, and women's basketball too. So that's going to do it for now on GC Live Sunday Reset. I appreciate all of you guys tuning in. As always, had a lot of fun talking with you guys on this Sunday evening. We'll do GC Live Sunday Reset as always again next week, and we'll be talking post Alabama and Auburn games about what's going on. And hopefully we're talking about something a little better than what we saw from men's basketball on Saturday, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. So if you're not already, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube page, Gamecock Central. Takes you right after we're done with the stream here. Just click out of this video, hit the subscribe button. It's easy as that. Turn on the bell icon if you want to get notifications whenever we go live or anything like that, or whenever we post a new video. And give this stream a thumbs up if you are enjoying it. If you're listening on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you're listening from. And this will also be available on all podcast platforms after this stream. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and I will talk to you guys again soon. I'll see you next time. Bye.